Professor Georgia Sakellari, who is a professor at Networked Systems at the University of Greenwich. And she has a particular interest in, shall I say, cybersecurity, performance, and energy efficiency of heterogeneous IoT environments, and again, edge computing. There might be some lack of progress. Feedback. So she's a PI of a H2020-RESCUER project on developing a secure technology toolkit for the next generation of first responders. And amongst other things, she is also on the editorial board of the IEEE IT Professional Journal and Elsevier's Impact. And she also serves as an expert evaluator and reviewer for the European Commission. So we look forward to submitting some of that data. Indeed. Right. So let's get something to know from Georgia with regards to the RESCUER project. Yes. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invite. So, as Prof said, I was the PI because it just ended this project. We had a really nice time, 3 years investigating technologies for first responders. So the project was called RESCUER, First Responders Center Support Toolkit for Operating in Adverse and Infrastructureless Environment. It was a huge project of 21 partners. 7 million euros, and we were lucky enough in those 21 partners to have 9 end users. So we had actual first responders that were testing our technologies. We had 6 pilots that we were able to test our technologies in, and we are continuing with this research forward. So the concept of RESCUER is basically how do we convert the heroes that we have, so our first responders, because they're already heroes. And believe me, that's me. I had the privileges of living their life for a single day, and I truly believe they're heroes. And our objective was to lead the research in order to take them from heroes to superheroes. So what this project was all about was different technologies that we can use in order to advance their, first of all, senses. So how can they perform their operations in a better way? Their location, their communication, and their cognitive load. So I will briefly say all those different technologies that we had in order for the students to understand what type of technologies we're talking about when we're talking about first responders and how we can advance them. So regarding the senses, what we had in our RESCUER project was different aspects of improving their eyesight. Okay, so we went through all the senses that we had. Okay, so robust vision was one of the technologies that we had, where the first responders will have a live camera that captures and processes live images, and the objective of this was to use machine learning in order to identify the objects, but beyond that, trying to identify objects that are behind adverse conditions. So for example, if it's raining or if there's smoke, how can we actually see the objects behind those, behind the smoke, behind the rain, behind the haze, the snow, and we actually tested that in the mountains of Navacerrada in Spain with snow on those days. Then another sense that we have is hearing. So one of the technologies that some partners of ours were doing is to try to enhance the hearing of people by capturing the audio and trying to cancel the noise and only allow useful information to be heard from the earpieces that the first responders were wearing. And also try to use those in order to provide feedback from the tools that we had to the first responders. So hearing feedback from the tools, also not just visual, as we will see later on. Then we had what we called augmented olfaction, smell. enhancing the smell of the first responders by using sensors, a set of sensors, in order to identify hazardous gases that might be around, in order for them to be able to be alerted before they go into a building or as soon as they're detected, so that they can protect themselves. Radar sensing and remote touching was one other technology where you had the detecting of obstacles behind walls, being able to see whether there is anything behind walls or objects that are moving towards you, and what type of objects they are, how big they are, and their speed that they are approaching you by, in order for you to be able to look out and use that information when you're in an operation. There were also signs of life detection, which is detecting life, breathing, slight movement behind thin walls, or using radar and other technologies. And wireless finder, where they're detecting personal devices, because nowadays most victims will have on them some kind of an electronic device. So the idea is not to detect the victim itself, but detect the devices that they might have, in order to be able to track more victims. Then another aspect that the RESCUER project was looking at was communication. How to enhance the communication between the first responders, because you might be in an incident where there is no infrastructure. So then the idea is to build an infrastructureless environment, an ad hoc network, where the first responders with devices that they carry on them build the network themselves, rather than relying on an infrastructure in order to communicate between them. And ensuring that without any infrastructure, they can communicate between them or send information back to the C2 interface, to the command center. And the command center will be able to visualize and show the data that the first responders were sending by, if and when infrastructure is available. And then finally, we had this concept of black box, which is not the same concept as in an airplane, where you see after the disaster has happened what happened. It's the other way around. Is having a box in, for example, smart buildings, which has preloaded information that first responders can use when they enter the building. So the idea is that, for example, it might have a blueprint of the actual building, so that when the first responders coming close to the door and the black box is there, they can load up the map of the building, so that with their location, which we will see later on, the location modules that we had, they will be able to locate themselves within the building with the blueprint of the building. Or in future buildings, where you will have some kind of sensors, and you will have where the elevators are, where the gas pipes are, where the different things are. This will be included in the information of the black box, so that you will know beforehand where to look, or if there were sensors in elevators, you will know that there were 5 people trapped in an elevator in that side of the building, etc., so that you will know beforehand where to concentrate when you're doing your rescue. And then one of the modules that we participated as University of Greenwich is the similar localization. So the idea here is to be able for the first responders to know their location regardless of where they are. And you might have different situations, different environments where you are outside. If you are outside and there is connection with the satellite, then great, you can use what one of our partners did, the Galileo assisted self-localization, where they did specific hardware in order to enhance the accuracy of GPS, of the European, the Galileo GPS system. Or we had some partners from Greece, which what they did is they did visual self-localization. And that means that they would, using a 360 camera, scan the building. So all of them have their own advantages and disadvantages. And that's why we try to combine all 3 in order to provide a better location system for the first responders. So the visual self-localization will scan the building and will use the camera in order to identify where exactly in the building you are in. And a third one is if none of the 2 were working, what we will do is we will use the inertial-based self-localization, which means that from the mobile phone that the first responder might carry on them, using the IMU, IMU, the inertial-based sensors of your mobile phone. Your accelerometer, your magnetometer, all of this that your mobile phone has to be able to locate yourself based on the previous location that you were in and see your movement and see where you're moving. And the novelty of the project was the fact that were able to fuse all three of them seamlessly and not needing to switch between the three. So what we achieved in the RESCUER project was to combine all three into a simple and always available localization tool. And we call it a meta tool because the actual fusion was not done at the level of the sensors, but was done at a higher level because not all tools have the same noise and it's very difficult to actually fuse them at that level. So what we did is we did it at a higher level where we would switch between the three based on the detection of what type of conditions we have. So, for example, if we were outside and Galileo had a good signal and the accuracy metric that it was emitting was low enough, we would go with that. But if that accuracy level had started to decrease and it's not very good, and the visual localization was able to emit a location, and the good thing about this tool was it was not emitting a location if it was not sure that this is where you are in the building. Then if it would emit, then we will send that location. And if nothing of the two works, then we will switch to the inertial system where, although it's less accurate than the other ones, you will always have some kind of location. And we were able to test it, and the way that the principle of working is that if we are outdoors, Galileo is selected. If the visual tool is emitting, then the visual tool is elected, and if no other option is available, then we resort to the inertial, which is less accurate, but at least we have some kind of information. And we're constantly trying to climb back the ladder to the more accurate system. And we've done some real experiments in Navacerrada, and we had some initial results where the mean error was 1.74 meters, but we had a minimum error of just 4 centimeters. So according to the environment, this can be very accurate. And we're currently see that 1.74 meters was because of the inertial system, which was inside. It didn't have any information, no way of correcting itself in any way. So what we are currently doing in one of our research is to use collaborative and opportunistic means of, if you have the black box, for example, and you know the location of the black box, then you can correct yourself and reduce the drifting of your inertial system in order for you to be able to improve the inertial localization aspect as well. Or if there are more than one mobile phones around, then what you can do is you can see the drift of the other person, and if it's less, then you correct your place towards that person in order to improve. And this is currently ongoing research that we're doing in order to improve further the inertial-based localization. Now, going back to the RESCUER, we had some AR interfaces, 2 systems, basically the HoloLens 2 and a smart helmet, which was a helmet that a Greek company made specifically for the RESCUER project, with specific hardware with a vision for the first responders to see the information. One other aspect that RESCUER had was the biosignal monitoring, trying to check the condition, the health condition of the actual first responders in order to be able to send information to their fellow FRs or to the C2 when some of them, their biosignals were not good. For example, and they're under stress or they have a problem. And one other aspect that we are looking at our partners in Spain were looking for was cognitive load balancing, because all of this information will have an effect of how can you actually as a human process it. And if you are under stress, can you process it the same way? Or is it better to reduce the information if you're not in a very good cognitive load? So this goes together with the information prioritization and with the data orchestrator, meaning that we need to then prioritize the information in order to understand which one is more important, and then regulate that information so that you don't send everything to the first responder according to the cognitive load. So just an overview of the different systems that we had. We had two subsystems, one with all the information that we talked about, and we had the actual HoloLens, or the smart helmet. With the smart helmet, had that monocle where you could see the information. And the information looked something like that. There were icons with different meaning that we had to train the first responders in order to understand what they are. So this is your heart rate, this is your lung capacity, this is the battery level of the ad hoc network device that you're holding on you, etc. So as you understand, so many different tools, they had to be, like some kind of regulated. And that was the biggest challenge that we had in this project. So the idea is, yes, every single one of the tools that you have can enhance and can make your work better. But what if you put them all together? Will that counterfeit the advantages of each technology by itself? So we had, first of all, like the not challenge that much, but the work of putting them all together, having an MQTT broker that will gather all the information. And then the challenge was, how do we actually regulate that information? Okay, because the most challenging aspect that our partners in Spain had was to actually, check whether they're overloaded with all this information, whether the FRs can handle all this information from all the different tools. There are two different aspects in that, and they found it really, really challenging to actually measure the cognitive load of a person. In the end, what they did is they measured the performance rather than the cognitive load, because it was very different per person, because different people act differently in different situations. So when they're stressed, some people actually work better under stress, meaning that they actually regulate the information by themselves and they just ignore the ones that they don't use. Some people are getting overwhelmed. So here we had different aspects to consider of how can we actually measure cognitive overload. And then another challenge was prioritizing the information, because for me as a medic, the actual heart rate of a person was more important than the location, not the location, but than let's say the gas detection. Okay, while if I am a firefighter, I don't really care about my heart rate. A lot of them say, yes, but that's fine. That's how my heart works. And I have very high heart rate, but that doesn't affect me when I'm working. So it was very difficult to prioritize. And our partners in Italy, what they tried to do is they had tried to categorize it into different groups. So different priorities for higher ranking first responders, different priorities for lower ranking, different priorities for the type of they are, whether they're medics, whether they're firefighters, whether they're mountain rescuers. And that was a very difficult task for them to find the priorities, because the priorities are, an easy way of doing it is just checking as an engineer the levels of it. And you say, if your heart rate is above 100 pulses, then that is trigger a note and put that as a high priority in order for that message to be propagated and be sent to the C2, for example. But that's not always the case. It's not always easy just to have thresholds and use those thresholds. So it had to be more advanced, the way that they were prioritizing the information. And then our part in that, as a University of Greenwich, was the actual regulation and orchestration information. So once we have all this, we're gathering it into the MQTT broker. How do we actually choose based on the priority that we have per message And based on the cognitive load of the message, how do we actually judge which one to display to the first responders AR system? This is what they will see. They will have all this information. Can they handle all this information? And which information shall we show in real time? And that was our biggest problem that we had. Okay, so what we needed to do is we needed to regulate the messages displayed, but keeping the cognitive load as low as possible without compromising the important information that they need in order to have a successful operation. And we needed two aspects. One was the cognitive load and the priority that we had to consider, but there was another decision, an external decision, which was what information do I actually send to the other cars? And this is an entirely different problem in the sense of I will then need to see, do I have a reliable network? Am I overwhelming my network if I send all information? Am I draining out the battery of my devices when I'm sending all this information? So two different aspects, same messages, but we had to make a decision of what to demonstrate, what to show to the first responder, and the other one was what to send to other first responders or the C2, the command center, without draining the battery of the devices that they are being used in order to send it, and without compromising the quality of the network in between. So if we see this as a like graph, we have our broker, our MQTT broker in the middle, we have all our tools. The way that the tools work is you have the actual hardware device, the sensors, the IoT devices, and then you have the RESCUER modules, which are the actual tools that process that. And then you get that process information, which is the messages for the first responder. So you have your radars or whatever, then you have the module of saying that this is a dangerous gas, and the actual message that you send to the MQTT broker is the gas levels are 50 and this is danger. Okay, all these different tools will do the same. One of the tools will be the prioritization tool, one will be the cognitive load, and one will be the visualization tool that actually observes the information. So everybody would publish and subscribe to the MQTT broker. And the question is, what should that broker have so that they will not actually receive all the information? So that the visualization tool will only receive the information that the first responders can handle. And the communication network will only send the information that the network can handle without draining the battery of the devices. So just to simplify, like a very, very simple example here, let's say that we have the inertia, which is the localization tool, in the inertial-based localization tool. And let's say that we have the radar sensing, which detects objects, their distance, obstacles, whether the speed that they're coming towards you, etc. So very easy, if you only had one, okay, you will go to, this is my the first responder one position. It sends to the broker. It then goes to the info prio, which is the prioritization tool. It looks at it, it prioritizes. We need to be careful here with the prioritization. It can be as challenging as we want. So you might have two priorities. One, do I show it to the actual person now? And the second one, do I send it to other people? Because if they're far away, that priority will be lower. What's the point of me knowing somebody that is further away and I cannot reach them? Okay, so then it sends back the priority that has been estimated, and at the same time, in parallel, you also have the cognitive load that gathers information and constantly says at what level the actual person is. And then that goes up to the data sharing orchestrator, which needs to make the decision. And the decision needs to be per message, and that was the most challenging part that we had to see. So, do I know whether in the next time frame I might receive a more important information? So I need to make a judgment of whether, yes, I send this over because it's important enough, and I'm not expecting a more important information to come, or do I not send it over? And then when the next one comes, same procedure, goes to the info prio, to the prioritization, I assess it, and I say, no, I should not send it to the other people, because that object, for example, is a chair behind a wall that nobody cares about. but I should know that this is a chair for myself to know what I'm seeing behind the smoke, or it's way too trivial and will not affect me. That object is further away from me, so I don't even need to show it to the first responder. And I don't actually need to send it to everybody else. So that information is insignificant. The detection that was made is an insignificant information. Okay, but the problem was that all this needed to happen in real time. And we cannot wait for messages, put the messages in an order of priority and say, okay, I will send the first 5. They needed the messages then and there when they received them. So what we had to do is we had to look at the history, keep continuously like using machine learning in order to continuously assess how frequent do messages come from each tool. Are they what we call routine messages? So for example, for the location, we knew that every second we will receive the location. So the tool was emitting every second the location of somebody. Meaning that if I know that it comes every second, maybe I can ignore this one for a higher priority one, because that will come every 5 seconds. So it's better to omit this information now in order to allow some more important information that I know will not come as frequent. But then I also need to have the provision of unpredicted events, because you might have a gas leak and then you detect a gas that you wouldn't, like that's just on event. So when it happens, it needs to initiate an event, and that is of highest priority. So I need to have that aspect of provisioning for unpredicted events as well within the time frame that we had. Okay, so this is in a nutshell what we have been doing in terms of the data sharing orchestrator. And this here you can see it in action. This is what they would actually see. Actually, it's not black. They would not see a black screen, the first responders. They will see behind it. It's transparent, so they will actually see the environment plus this information on their monocle. So, and we can see that as their cognitive load increases, what we see is that we are decreasing the amount of information that they receive, so that they are able to not get overwhelmed. And then as the actual cognitive load becomes better and they can handle more information, we're allowing them more information. So currently, this is what we're still continuing to work on with the Technical University of Madrid. And we are analyzing the data that we had from the pilots in order to see the effectiveness of this data sharing orchestrator. Thank you very much.